Good day, mga kapwa ko working law student. No? Ah, dito ngayon, panibagong upload na naman tayo. Again, in our basic taxation law series. And this time, ito yung ating part 2, no, ng ating basic taxation law. So again, just a disclaimer, ang video na to ay ginawa ko po as a way sa pag-aaral sa subject na ito. Hindi pa po ako lawyer, nor hindi rin ako eksperto sa field na ito. I am just expressing my idea kung paano ko naintindihan ang subject ng basic taxation law. So, patuloy natin. So, this time, ito yung uh, continuation ng part 1. So, dito, sinasabi na ang tax is a burden. Naging burden your tax kasi it is a forced contribution. So, the subject of taxation is persons, property, and rights. It is all-encompassing. Tax is a forced contribution. So, it is defined by Aban as a civil liability of citizen that may give rise to criminal prosecution if not performed. One cannot refuse to pay tax because he does not derive any benefits from it. Otherwise, there will be sanction. So, tax is the price we pay for a civilized society. There is no need that one must see an actual or direct consideration. It is enough that the money made for taxation is for profit and for cost and for the benefit of the public in general. That's why tax is a burden to be used as a power to destroy, and at the same time, it can also be used as a power to build. So, number 4 is jurisdiction. So, jurisdiction in taxation refers usually to territory. So, now, we will go back to the territoriality principle. So, territoriality in the sense that taxation is jurisdictional in nature. This means the power of taxation is the power of taxation operates only within the territorial limits of the taxing authority. General rule is that once object or subject of taxation is outside the Philippines, it is no longer subject to Philippine taxation. But there is an exception to that rule. If there is a privity of relationship between the taxing authority and the tax subject or object. Again, the general rule is that once object or subject of taxation is outside the Philippines, it is no longer subject to Philippine taxation. But the exception is that if there is a privity of relationship between the taxing authority and the tax subject or object. Now, when we say privity of relationship, so ano bang ibig sabihin na to? So there is such privity so as to be covered by tax jurisdiction if the taxing authority can afford protection to the tax subject or object. Kaya tayong protektahan, no, ng taxing authority, then it will become an exception. So, there are three factors to determine if government can afford protection. So, ito yung three factors to determine if government can afford protection doon sa taxpayer. Number 1, citizenship of the tax subject or object. Number 2, residence or location of the tax subject or object. And number 3, the source of the tax subject or object. So, yan yung factors to determine if government can afford the desired or necessary protection. Now, let's go to the situs of taxation. So when we say situs, it is the place, no? It refers to a place. So it means the place of taxation. So the situs of taxation are the general rules that states or taxing authorities follow when it comes to taxation or the taxation schemes, and most of them, if not all, are applicable to the Philippine taxation setting. The situs of taxation is the place or authority that has the right to impose and collect taxes. It has been said that tax laws basically operate only within the territory of the tax authority. This is so because it is only within the boundaries of the tax authority where it could provide protection to the taxpayer. Now, as to the determination of the status of taxation, number one, the benefits protection theory. You have to remember this one because this is so important in taxation. Because ito yung mga reason, no, why we are taxing, no, the people in the state. So, number one, the benefits protection theory or symbiotic relationship. The reciprocal relation of protection and support between the taxpayer and the state. The state gives protection, and in order to continue giving protection, it must be supported by the form or in the form of taxes. Number two is the jurisdiction state or political unit that gives protection has the right to demand support. So technically, tax laws are jurisdictional or operate only within the territorial jurisdiction of a state because that is where it could give protection. This is subject to the concept of mobilia secuntur personam. Okay, again, mobilia secuntur personam. So there are also factors that determine whether tax subject or object is subject to Philippine taxation. Number one, the kind of tax being imposed or levied. Number two, place where the thing or property is located. Number three, residence of the person being taxed. Number four, citizenship of the person being taxed. And lastly, the place where the excise or privilege or business or occupation is being performed, meaning it is the place of exercise. So there is no need for all factors to go together. It is enough that one or some factors exist in order that the tax subject or object may be covered by Philippine taxation. Okay, so kahit isa lang dyan, no? Or marami dyan, but hindi kailangan na lahat yan maging present for us to be able to cover the subject or object in the Philippine taxation. So only one, if andyan yung kind, then covered na. Yung place, covered na rin, no? Kung saan yung thing or property is located. Yung residence ng person being taxed. So if present yan, then you are covered already. Citizenship, place also of the where the exercise or the excise or privilege of business or occupation is being performed. Now let's go to different types of tax subjects. So there are different types of tax subjects. So number one, citizenship. Here is income tax, no? Under the income tax, so we have here three considerations. So under income tax, there are three considerations, and my mnemonics here is CRS, no? CRS. Citizenship of the taxpayer. Number two, residence or location of the taxpayer. And number three, source of the income. Again, citizenship of the taxpayer, residence or location of the taxpayer, and number three, source of the income. Now, example, a Metro Manila resident, like City of Manila resident, earning income in Manila via compensation income, it is covered by the Philippine taxation. Another one, a Cebu City resident earning income abroad taxable in the Philippines. Still, covered because the government can afford protection being a Philippine citizen. Okay, so clear. It's very clear. Number two, a non-resident. What is a non-resident? Non-resident foreigner earning uh, income in the Philippines. So that non-resident foreigner income made in the Philippines is taxable in the Philippines. Still covered because the source of her income is in the Philippines, and the Philippine government can still afford protection because she earns and contributes to the community. Another example, no? A Filipino residing abroad, having properties in the Philippines, it is still subject of Philippine taxation since the source of income is in the Philippines. So, now let's go to tax on persons. A state may impose taxes on a person subject to its sovereignty. In the Philippines, we have community tax or cedula. Thus, community tax is paid in the community for such. Now, let's go to the case of CIR versus Julian Bayer Nickel. So here, the facts of the case is that Julian Bayer Nickel, who is a non-resident German citizen, is the president of Jubanitex, a domestic corporation engaged in textile products. Now, Bayer Nickel was appointed as commission agent and will receive 10% of sales commission on all sales concluded and collected through her efforts. In 1995, Bayer Nickel received 1.7 million as commission, from which Jubanitex withheld corresponding 10% withholding tax of or 170,000 and remitted it to the Bureau of Internal Revenue. In 1998, Bayer Nickel filed a claim to refund the amount of 170,000 alleged to have been mistakenly withheld and remitted to BIR, and contended that her commission income is not taxable in the Philippines because the same was a compensation for her services rendered in Germany and therefore considered as income from sources outside the Philippines. Then she went to the Court of Tax Appeal via a reconsideration, contending that BIR did not take action on her claim for refund. Then the Court of Tax Appeals denied her claim and held that the commissions were actually her remuneration in the performance of her duties as president and not as sales agent. Thus, the income is taxable in the Philippines because Jubanitex is a domestic corporation. Now, the Court of Appeals reversed the Court of Tax Appeals decision, holding that the commissions received were on sales agent, were a sales agent, and since the source of income means that activity or services that produce such, it is not taxable for the marketing activities was performed in Germany. That's why we come with this issue at hand. The issue here is that is Bayer Nickel's sales commission income taxable in the Philippines? Now, the Supreme Court ruled yes. She failed to discharge burden of proof. Number one, a non-resident alien's personal services were taxable. Pursuant to Section 25 of the National Internal Revenue Code, non-resident aliens, whether or not engaged in trade or business, are subject to Philippine income taxation on their income received from all sources within the Philippines. So take note of that keyword, income received from all sources within the Philippines. Thus, the keyword in determining the taxability of non-resident aliens is the income's source. In constituting the meaning of source in Section 25 of the NIRC, resort must be had on the origin of the provision. The important factor, therefore, which determines the source of income of personal services is not the residence of the payer or the place where the contract for service is entered into or the place of payment, but the place where the services were actually rendered. Again, let's go back to the last words in the paragraph, income received from all sources within the Philippines. So, second one, the court reiterates that the rule that source of income relates to the property, activity, or service that produced the income. With respect to rendition of labor or personal service, as in the instant case, it is the place where the labor or service was performed that determines the source of the income. There is therefore no merit in petitioner's interpretation, which equates source of income in labor or personal service with the residence of the payer or the place of payment of the income. Okay, so number two, not capacity, but sufficiency of evidence to prove services were performed in Germany. So it's not the capacity, but it is the sufficiency of evidence to prove services were performed in Germany. The decisive factual consideration here is not the capacity in which respondent received the income, but the sufficiency of evidence to prove that the services she rendered were performed in Germany. So the rule of construction here is that tax refunds are in the nature of tax exemptions and are to be construed strictissimi juris against the taxpayer. To those, therefore, who claim a refund rests the burden of proving that the transaction subjected to tax is actually exempt from taxation. What she presented here is that the evidence to prove activities abroad were copies of documents she allegedly faxed to Giovanni-Tex and bearing instructions as to the fabrics to be used and samples of sale order which do not show that she was in Germany when she sent such instructions or orders. So as to whether these instructions or orders gave rise to consummated sales and whether these sales were truly concluded in Germany, respondent presented no such evidence. Neither did she establish reasonable connection between the orders or instructions faxed and the reported monthly sales purported to have transpired in Germany. So therefore, the court said, in sum, we find that the fax documents presented by respondent did not constitute substantial evidence or that relevant evidence that a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support the conclusion that it was in Germany where she performed the income-producing service which gave rise to the reported monthly sales in the months of March and May to September of 1995. She thus failed to discharge the burden of proving that her income was from sources outside the Philippines and exempt from the application of our income tax law. Hence, the claim for tax refund should be denied. So in this case, Julian Bayer Nickel lost the case because she was not able to discharge burden of proof. Now let's go to property tax. Under property, there are two kinds of property. Number one, real properties, and number two, personal properties. So when we say real properties, the situs is where the property is located. In the Philippines, the real property tax is governed by the Local Government Code of 1991 or Republic Act 7160. Thus, if A has a land in Baguio, real property taxes are imposed or levied by LGU Baguio. Properties outside the jurisdiction of the city cannot be levied by them pursuant to the territory principle. So kung si A merong lupa sa Baguio, so it should be taxable in Baguio. But if si A may lupa sa Benguet, Baguio cannot tax that property in Benguet because of the territoriality. Okay, so let's go to personal property. There are also distinction as to personal property. We have one, the tangible personal property, where the property is located, or this is the prevailing rule, though some suggest it follows the owner. Where the property is located, it follows the owner. And number two, the intangible personal property. So when we say intangible personal property, the general rule is that the thing follows its owner. This is because the properties have no form and essentially rights which follow the owner. But there is an exception here. Okay? So in this general rule, you can see that there is mobilia secuntur personam. So the exception here is that when the law provides for the situs, like stocks of a corporation, but must determine whether they are in the Philippines or it is outside the subject of or to Philippine taxation. So example, A died outside the Philippines but has Philippine stocks. As a rule, mobilia secuntur personam applies, but when rights are exercisable in the Philippines, being a stock from Philippine corporation, the owner will exercise rights in Philippine jurisdiction. So that's the example of it. Okay, so of the intangible personal property. Now, as to the excise tax, also known as privilege tax, this is the tax on enjoyment of privilege. This is a tax on enjoyment of privilege. According to Dumondon, the current definition of an excise tax is that levied on a specific article rather than one upon performance of activity. Now, since 1986, excise taxes refer exclusively to specific or ad valorem taxes imposed by the National Internal Revenue Code. Despite above, the concept of privilege tax still finds application for where the transaction is performed. Thus, the gauge for the taxability does not depend on the location of the office but attaches upon the place where the respective transaction is perfected and consummated, as in the case of Allied Treated versus City Mayor of Manila, 77, Philippine 496. Now, the situs of taxation, or the situs, is where the act is performed, where occupation is engaged in, or where the business is done. Okay, so remember that the situs is where the act is performed, where occupation is engaged in, or where the business is done. Now, let's go to donor's tax. Okay, donor's tax, the following are to be considered. Number one, residency of donor. Number two, citizenship of donor, and sometimes location of the property. Note that it is to be noted that the residence and the nationality of the donee is not taken into consideration for determining whether the donation is subject to donor's tax. Again, it is to be noted that the residence and the nationality of the donee is not taken into consideration for determining whether the donation is subject to donor's tax. Now, let's go to the most common, sales tax. Okay? Sales tax, the situs is the place where the contract is consummated. Kung saan nangyari yung transaction, saan nagkapirmahan, doon yung situs. Now, let's go to business tax. Now, in business tax, the situs of business and occupation is the place where the business and occupation are being conducted. So the reason being that this is the place which gives protection to the business or occupation. Now let's go to the case, the case of CIR versus Japan Airlines. GR number 60714-279 Philippine 49 Phil 499 October 4, 1991. The facts of the case that Japan Airlines did not have planes that lifted or landed passengers nor cargo in the Philippines since 1959 to 1963. Since it was not granted by the Civil Aeronautics Board is Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity to Operate in the Philippines. In July 1957, Japan Airlines constituted Philippine Airlines as its general sales agent in the Philippines. Thus, PAL sold in behalf of Japan Airlines plane tickets and the reservation for cargo spaces used by passengers of Japan Airlines. In 1972, Japan Airlines received deficiency income tax assessment notice and demand letter from the CIR, or the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, for around 2 million with surcharge and interest from 1953 until 1963. So, Japan Airlines, Japan Airlines here protested said assessment, alleging that as non-resident foreign as a non-resident foreign corporation, it was taxable only on income from Philippine sources. And there being no such income during the period, it was not liable for any deficiency income tax liabilities. But this was denied by the CIR. Then the Court of Tax Appeals reversed the CIR. So the issue here is that, does Japan Airlines have taxable source of income in the Philippines? The Supreme Court ruled, yes, it has source of income in the Philippines. Now, the test of taxability, the source of an income is the property, activity, or service that produced the income. For the source of income to be considered as coming from the Philippines, it is sufficient that the income is derived from activity within the Philippines. The absence of flight operations to and from the Philippines is not determinative of the source of income or the situs of income taxation. The test of taxability is the source, and the source of an income is that activity which produced the income. Now, in a related case in CIR versus Air India, the court ruled that revenue derived from sales or airplane tickets through agent Philippine Airlines is considered as taxable income, and that also in CIR versus American Airlines, it was likewise declared that for the source of income to be considered as coming from the Philippines, it is sufficient that the income is derived from activities within this country, regardless of the absence of flight operations within Philippine territory. So, that's the rulings, no? Now, as to the second contention, no, Japan Airlines is a resident foreign corporation. A resident foreign corporation under the 1977 tax code applies to foreign corporation engaged in trade or business within the Philippines or having an office or place of business therein. So there being no dispute that Japan Airlines constituted Philippine Airlines as local agent to sell its airline tickets, there can be no conclusion other than that Japan Airlines is a resident foreign corporation doing business in the Philippines. Indeed, the sale of tickets is the very lifeblood of the airline business, the generation of sales being the paramount objective. Thus, Japan Airlines is ordered to pay the deficiency taxes inclusive of interest and charges. Now, let's go to another case. It's also an exciting case of Iloilo Butlers Incorporated versus City of Iloilo. GR number 52019-247 Phil 575, August 19, 1988. The facts of the case that petitioner filed a complaint seeking to recover 3,300 that constituted payments of municipal license taxes under City of Iloilo, Tax Ordinance number 5, which it paid under protest. Petitioner engaged in the business of bottling soft drinks and selling the same to its customers with a bottling plant in the municipality of Pabia outside jurisdiction of respondent. It was stated that it once operated in Iloilo City, which it paid taxes when it was there. No? Technically, they paid that because when they are there. But it transferred later in 1968 to Pabia. In 1969, the city demanded from the petitioner the payment of municipal income tax or municipal license tax. Petitioner argued that its bottling plant is outside Iloilo City and that it sells its own product to customers directly and cannot be considered as a distributor. It was shown that Iloilo Butlers does not maintain any store in Iloilo City but by means of fleet of delivery trucks. So meron silang mga delivery trucks from its plant in Pabia and directly to its customers in the province of Iloilo as well as Iloilo City. The Court of First Instance, now the Regional Trial Court, ruled in favor of petitioner, declaring it not liable under the tax ordinance, ordering the city to pay it the amount. Now, as to the arguments, number one, it contends that since it is not engaged in the independent business of distributing soft drinks, but that its activity of selling is merely an incident to or is a necessary consequence of its main or principal business of bottling, then it is not liable under the city tax ordinance. That's the first contention. Second is that it claims that only manufacturers or bottlers having their plants inside the territorial jurisdiction of the city are covered by the ordinance. So we come to the issue here, in this case, is that whether Iloilo Butlers, which had its bottling plant in Pabia, Iloilo, but which sold soft drinks in Iloilo City, is liable under Iloilo City Tax Ordinance Number 5, which imposes municipal license tax on distributors of soft drinks. Now, the court here ruled that yes, it had an independent selling or distributing business. So, the tax ordinance coverage, so looking at the Iloilo City's tax ordinance, the coverage that the ordinance imposes tax on persons, firms, and corporations engaged in, number one, distribution. Okay? So, the Iloilo Butler said that they are only distribute. No? So, they are part of number one, distribution. Number two, manufacture. Of course, they don't manufacture anymore within the Iloilo City. And number three, bottling. So, it is outside also. Bottling of soft drinks within the territorial city of Iloilo. Thus, the second argument lacks merit. Iloilo's butlers falls under the second category, and thus it was engaged in the separate business of selling or distributing drinks independently from bottling them. So, kasi nagbibenta sila di ba? Diretso nila yung mga soft drinks papunta sa mga stores. So, they are still engaged in distribution. So, the right to manufacture implies the right to sell or distribute the manufactured products. So, hence, for tax purposes, a manufacturer does not necessarily become engaged in the separate business of selling simply because it sells the products it manufactures. In certain cases, however, a manufacturer may also be considered as engaged in the separate business of selling its products. To determine whether an entity engaged in the principal business of manufacturing is likewise engaged in the separate business of selling, its marketing system or sales operations must be looked into. Now, for the Iloilo Butlers, they have two marketing systems. Number one, manufacturer enters into sales transactions and invoices the sales at its main office, where purchase orders are received and approved before delivery orders are sent to the company's warehouses, where in turn actual deliveries made. No warehouse sales are made nor are separate stores maintained where products may be sold independently from the main office. So, the warehouses only serve as storage sites and delivery points of the products earlier sold at the main office. Number two, the second manufacturing marketing system is that sales transactions are entered into and perfected at stores or warehouses maintained by the company. So anyone who desires to purchase the product may go to the store or warehouse and there purchase the merchandise. The stores and warehouses serve as the selling centers. So, entities operating under the first system are not considered engaged in the separate business of selling or dealing in their products. independent of their manufacturing business. But entities operating under the second system are considered engaged in the separate business of selling. So here, in this case, the company distributed its soft drinks by means of a fleet of delivery trucks which went directly to customers in the different places in Iloilo province. Sales transactions with customers were entered into and sales were perfected and consummated by route salesmen. Truck sales were made independently of transactions in the main office. So, the delivery trucks were not used solely for the purpose of delivering soft drinks previously sold at Pabia. So, they serve as selling units. So, yung mga delivery trucks, they serve as selling units. They were what were called until recently as the rolling stores. So, the delivery trucks were therefore much the same as the stores and warehouses under the secondary marketing system. So, here, Iloilo Butlers Incorporated thus falls under the second category above. That is, the corporation was engaged in the separate business of selling or distributing soft drinks independently of its business or of bottling them. So, the citos of excise tax, the tax imposed upon or under Ordinance Number 5 is an excise tax. It is a tax on the privilege of distributing, manufacturing, or bottling soft drinks. Being an excise tax, it can be levied by the taxing authority only when the acts, privileges, or businesses are done or performed within the jurisdiction of said authority, specifically the citus of the act of distributing, bottling, or manufacturing soft drinks must be within city limits before an entity engaged in any of the activities may be taxed in Iloilo. So, sales were made by Iloilo Butlers Incorporated in Iloilo City. Thus, the court have no option but to declare the company liable under the tax ordinance. So, naigo sila or tinamaan sila doon sa number 2. Now, let's go to the purpose of taxation. As to the purpose of taxation, we have primary and secondary. The primary purpose of taxation is raising income or generate revenue for the funds to be used by the government in order that it may conduct its operations. It is the lifeblood of the government without which it cannot operate. Now, the secondary purpose is that social justice and or compensatory. Like in the case of the senior citizens, no? We will come to that later on. Then, we have also regulatory or sumptuary. Example is the excise tax on liquors. And number 3, implement the eminent domain powers of government, the heart of taxation, which is the public purpose. Note that the power of taxation can also be used for police power, such as the regulatory effect of excise tax. It is also used as a tool to promote social justice. Now, the social justice provision in taxation, an example is here, the discount given to the senior citizens, but the social justice provision is applicable not only to the people in general, but also the government. This is when the power to tax was delegated to the municipal corporations. So, we'll come to the question of how may the power to tax be utilized to carry out the social justice program of our government. Now, it was answered in the case of Batangas Power Company before versus Batangas and National Power Corporation, GR number 152675, April 28, 2004. The facts of the case that due to the power problem of Philippines during the early 1990s, the National Power Corporation sought to attract investors in power plant operations by giving them incentives, one of which were the National Power Corporation's assumption of payment of their taxes in Build, Operate, Transfer Agreement. Now, Enron Power and National Power Corporation then entered into a Build, Operate, Transfer, and then to transfer its plant to National Power Corporation after 10 years of operations. Now, the BOT agreement provided that the National Power Corporation shall be responsible for payment of all taxes imposed except income tax, and permit fees. Later, the Enron Power assigned its obligation to Batangas Power Company. Batangas Power Company registered as Pioneer Enterprise entitled Tax Holiday for 6 years. Now, BPC or Batangas City then sent letter to BPC demanding payment for the business taxes and penalties under the Batangas Tax Code. BPC refused to pay citing its tax holiday. Thus, the city amended and demanded those not covered by 6-year period. BPC still refused to pay and asserted that the city should collect tax from NPC as the latter assumed responsibility for its payment under the BOT agreement. Now, NPC refused to pay BPC's business tax as it constituted an indirect tax on NPC, which is a tax-exempt corporation. Now, the regional trial court held that the Batangas Power Company is liable and the National Power Corporation's tax exemption was withdrawn by Republic Act 7160. Now, the Supreme Court ruled here that petitioners insist that NPC's exemption from all taxes under its charter had not been repealed by the local government code. Again, the NPC's exemption from all under its charter had not been repealed by local. That is the petitioner's argument. They argue that NPC's charter is a special law which cannot be impliedly repealed by a general and later legislation like the local government code. They likewise anchor their claim of tax exemption on Section 133(o) of the local government code, which exempts government instrumentalities such as the NPC from taxes imposed by local government units or the LGUs. The Supreme Court said they find no merit on those contentions. The effect of the local government code on the tax exemption privileges of the National Power Corporation has already been extensively discussed and settled in the recent case of NPC versus City of Cabanatuan. In the said case, the Supreme Court recognized the removal of the blanket exclusion of government instrumentalities from local taxation as one of the most significant provisions of the 1991 Local Government Code. Specifically, the court stressed that Section 193 of the Local Government Code, an express and general repeal of all statutes granting exemptions from local taxes, withdrew the sweeping tax privileges previously enjoyed by the National Power Corporation under its charter, and the court explained the rationale on that provision. Thus, in recent years, the increasing social challenges of the times expanded the scope of the state activity, and taxation has become a tool to realize social justice and the equitable distribution of wealth, economic progress, and the protection of local industries, as well as public welfare and similar objectives. Taxation assumes even greater significance with the ratification of the 1987 Constitution. Thenceforth, the power to tax is no longer vested exclusively on Congress. Local legislative bodies are now given direct authority to levy taxes, fees, and other charges pursuant to Article 10, Section 5 of the 1987 Constitution. This paradigm shift results from the realization that genuine development can be achieved only by strengthening local autonomy and promoting decentralization of governance. For a long time, the country's highly centralized government structure has bred a culture of dependence among local government leaders upon the national leadership. It has also dampened the spirit of initiative, innovation, and imaginative resilience in matters of local development on the part of the local government leaders. The only way to shatter this culture of dependence is to give the LGUs a wider role in the delivery of basic services and confer them sufficient powers to generate their own sources for the purpose. So to achieve this goal, the 1987 Constitution mandates Congress to enact a local government code that will consistent with the basic policy of local autonomy set the guidelines and limitations to this grant of taxing powers. Now, to recall, uh, prior to the enactment of the Local Government Code in 1991, various measures have been enacted to promote local autonomy. Despite these initiatives, however, the shackles of dependence on the national government remained. So, the local government units were forced with the same problems that hamper their capabilities to participate effectively in the national development efforts. So, among which are inadequate tax base, lack of fiscal control over external sources of income, limited authority to prioritize and approve development projects, heavy dependence on external sources of income, and limited supervisory control over personnel of national line agencies. Considered as the most revolutionary piece of legislation on local autonomy, the Local Government Code effectively deals with the fiscal constraints faced by LGUs. It widens the tax base of LGUs to include taxes which were prohibited by previous laws. Next is the public purpose. Public purpose was discussed in the case of Planters Products versus Fertifil. Now, the term public purpose is not defined. It is an elastic concept that can be hammered to fit modern standards. Jurisprudence states that public purpose should be given a broad interpretation. It does not only pertain to those purposes which are traditionally viewed as essentially government functions, such as building roads and delivery of basic services, but also includes those purposes designed to promote social justice. Thus, public money may now be used for the relocation of illegal settlers, low-cost housing, and urban and agrarian reform. While the categories of what may constitute a public purpose are continually expanding in light of the expansion of government functions, the inherent requirement that taxes can only be exacted for a public purpose still stands. Public purpose is the heart of a tax law. Remember that one. Public purpose is the heart of a tax law. When a tax law is only masked to exact funds from the public, when its true intent is to give undue benefit and advantage to a private enterprise, that law will not satisfy the requirement of public purpose. So I hope that is clear. No? Now, let's go to the case of Pambansang Koalisyon versus Executive Secretary, GR number 147036-37, 685 Phil 295, April 10, 2012. Now, these are consolidated petitions to declare unconstitutional certain presidential decrees and executive orders of the martial law era relating to the raising and use of Cocolibay funds. Now, Cocolibay funds are prima facie public funds. The court was satisfied that the Cocolibay funds were raised pursuant to law to support a proper governmental purpose. They were raised with the use of the police and taxing powers of the state for the benefit of the coconut industry and its farmers in general. The Commission on Audit reviewed the use of the funds. The Bureau of Internal Revenue treated them as public funds, and the very laws governing coconut levies recognized their public character. The court has also recently declared that the Cocolibay funds are in the nature of taxes and can only be used for public purpose. Again, Cocolibay funds are in the nature of taxes and can only be used for public purpose. Taxes are enforced proportional contributions from persons and property levied by the state by virtue of its sovereignty for the support of the government and for all its public needs. Now, here in this case, the Cocolibay funds were imposed pursuant to law, namely Republic Act 6260 and Presidential Decree 276. The funds were collected and managed by the Philippine Coconut Authority an independent government corporation directly under the president. And as the respondent public officials pointed out, the pertinent laws use the term levy, which means to tax, in describing the exaction. Of course, unlike ordinary revenue laws, RA 6260 and PD 276 did not raise money to boost the government general funds, but to provide means for the rehabilitation and stabilization of a threatened industry, the coconut industry, which is so affected with public interest as to be within the police power of the state. The fund sought to support the coconut industry, one of the main economic backbones of the country, and to secure economic benefits for the coconut farmers and farm workers. Now, the fund here is that not a private property of farmers, not public purpose. Notably, the raising of money by levy on coconut farm production, a form of taxation, is already stated. It began in 1971 for the purpose of developing the coconut industry and promoting the interest of coconut farmers. The use of the fund was expanded in 1973 to include the stabilization of the domestic market for coconut-based consumer goods, and in 1974 to divert part of the funds for obtaining direct benefit to coconut farmers after 5 years, or in 1976. However, PD 961 declared the coco levy funds private property of the farmers. PD 1468 reiterated this declaration in 1978, but neither presidential decree actually turned over possession of control to the funds to the farmers in their private capacity. The government continued to wield undiminished authority over the management and disposition of those funds. Now, in any event, such declaration is void. An owner is free to exercise all attributes of ownership, the right, among others, to possess, use, and enjoy, abuse, or consume, and dispose or alienate the thing owned. The owner is, of course, free to waive all of some of these rights in favor of others. But in the case of the coconut farmers, now, in the case of coconut farmers, they could not individually or collectively waive what have not been and could not be legally imparted to them. Section 2 of PD 755, Article 3, Section 5 of PD 961, and Article 3, Section 5 of PD 1468 completely ignore the fact that coco levy funds are public funds raised through taxation. And since taxes could be exacted only for a public purpose, they cannot be declared private properties of individuals, although such individuals fall within a distinct group of persons. So here, the court, of course, grants that there is no hard and fast rule for determining what constitutes public purpose. It is an elastic concept that could be made to fit into modern standards. Public purpose, for instance, is no longer restricted to traditional government functions like building roads and schoolhouses or safeguarding public health and safety. Public purpose has been construed as including the promotion of social justice. Thus, public funds may be used for relocating illegal settlers, building low-cost housing for them, and financing both urban and agrarian reforms that benefit certain poor individuals. Still, these uses relieve volatile inequities in society and therefore impact on public order and welfare as a whole. So that's what the court said in this case of the coco levy funds. Okay, so but here the declarations do not distinguish between wealthy coconut farmers and the impoverished ones, yung mga mayayaman at mahihirap. And even if they did, the government cannot just embark on a philanthropic orgy of inordinate dole-outs for motives political or otherwise. So it's very clear that they did not have the distinction, no? Distinction as to between wealthy coconut farmers and those that are also uh, impoverished. Consequently, such declarations are void since they appropriate public funds for private purposes and therefore violate the citizen's right to substantive due process. So, klarong-klaro, kitang-kita yung ruling ng Supreme Court sa case na ito. Okay? So, sinabi din ng Supreme Court dyan na uh, it would altogether be different daw sana if the law nag-mention ng kailangan mag-set apart ng portion of the Coco Levi Fund for improving the lives of destitute coconut farm owners or workers for their social amelioration to establish a proper government purpose. Pero hindi nangyari yan. Hindi na ilagay doon sa batas, no? It could also be the support for the poor is generally recognized as a public duty and has long been an accepted exercise of public police power in the promotion of the common good. So, yan yung sinabi ng Supreme Court dyan. So, again, thank you very much. Maraming salamat po sa pakikinig o panunood sa ating part 2 ng Basic Taxation Law. Again, thank you very much and thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, this channel, Working Law Student PH. Then, paki-click ng like button at saka paki-click na rin ng notification bell para notified kayo kung meron tayong mga bagong uploads. Yung part 3 nito will be coming up in the next day. And then also, available din ito sa ating Facebook page, Working Law Student PH. Please follow also there on that page. So again, maraming salamat po and God bless us all.